So The Way, is the movie like walking the Camino? What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the movie that was made in 2010 starring Martin Sheen. It's called The Way. It's a really good movie that is set on the Camino. But a lot of people don't like it, particularly people who have walked the Camino a number of times. They say, oh, it's not really like that. And then some people watch it and say that they love it. So is that movie like walking the Camino? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about this week, coming right up. Okay, so is the movie realistic? Well, kind of is and kind of isn't. So, sorry, I'm not going to leave you hanging till the end, but I want to really explain to you what the movie isn't and what it is, and if you haven't seen the movie, maybe what you can get out of it. And I'm going to glance at a few notes here just so to make sure I get some of the facts right. So the movie was made in 2010, starring Martin Sheen. It was written and directed by his son, Emilio Estevez. And this is not going to be a technical breakdown of the movie, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. And yeah, a lot of people don't like it in Camino circles because they say, oh, you know, they're walking in the wrong direction, or they got it all out of sequence because, like, after 7 days, he's having a coffee outside a cafe which you pass on day one. And some of them are wearing jeans, and you know, they get all uptight about this. All I would say is it's a movie. It's not a documentary. It's a movie, and I happen to think it's a really good movie, and it's set on the Camino. So we're going to be talking about this question of, yes, but is the Camino really like that? So let me just give you a little bit of background. I mean, I saw that movie first in 2014, and I have to say, after watching that movie, I turned to my wife and said, I want to do that. And if you have no idea what the movie is about, or you haven't seen it yet, the movie is basically the story of Martin Sheen's character, Tom, forget the character's name, Tom Avery. And he basically gets this phone call. This is not a spoiler because it happens in the first scene. He gets this phone call which basically says, you know, your son's died in France, and he heads off to France to bring his son's body home. And he discovers that his son died on the first day walking out of Saint-Jean on the Camino Frances, walking the Camino. And of course, he knows nothing about it, and slowly he kind of finds out more about it and decides to walk the Camino with the ashes of his son. So all of that happens in the first few minutes. It's not a spoiler, so don't worry about it. So I first saw that movie in 2014. I said to my wife, I want to walk that, because the experience that was being portrayed by Martin Sheen's character, it was kind of what I was yearning for. I wanted to kind of drop out for a little bit, get some time on my own, time to sort of think about stuff and prioritize. And, you know, maybe it was that time in my life and it just connected, it just clicked with me. And I thought, wow, that is something that I would really like to do. And a few thousand other people have done it over the years too. It's almost become a little bit snobbish, whereby people don't like to admit that they've walked the Camino because they saw the movie. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's inspired so many people to walk the Camino and to get so much benefit out of it. I think it's great. I absolutely walked it because I saw the movie. I had never heard of the Camino prior to that. I think the other trigger for people walking the Camino was that book by, her name will come to me, actress, which was a bit weird. I bought the book and I read a few pages and I thought, don't know, not sure what planet this woman's on. But there's been a few books over the years, but this movie really reinvigorated it, I think. So how many times have I watched the movie? People often say that. I don't know, at least 30. I think it's great. I skip odd scenes that I don't kind of like too much. And I've actually walked the Camino 3 times. And I'll walk it a lot more because after that first time, I just enjoyed the experience so much. It's something that I want to repeat. So I've walked at the Camino Frances 3 times, twice from Saint-Jean, as he does in the movie, and one time a shorter version. But I'll definitely walk other Caminos as well. So I'll come to the bits that I really like about the movie and some of the things that people don't like about it. But it helps to understand a little bit of background, I think, because whilst it is a movie that's set on the Camino, there is a very, very strong connection with Martin Sheen's family and the Camino and that part of Spain. So if you weren't aware of it, Martin Sheen was actually born Ramon Estevez, and his father came from Galicia in northwest Spain, which of course is where the Camino passes through. And his mother was Irish. So Martin is a Catholic. He's a practicing Catholic, as far as I know. He's mentioned that a few times. And he wanted to walk the Camino with his grandson, Taylor. But I think he was filming West Wing at the time, and his schedule was so busy, he said, look, I can't really take the time out to walk it, let's drive it. So he and his grandson, Taylor, drove the Camino in 2003. Taylor actually met his future wife in Spain, I think near Hornios, which is just west of Burgos, because there's an albergue in Hornios just on the left as you enter the village, where there's pictures of the filmmaking and stuff all over it. So I think Taylor's wife came from around that area somewhere. So they drove it. Emilio, Martin Sheen's son, decided he wanted to write a movie about it. He also wanted to write a movie in which his father could star. And he says quite openly that parts of the idea of the movie were drawn from a book by Jack Hitt called A Modern Day Walk Down the Camino Route in Spain. I actually just ordered that because it sounds quite interesting. And as well, and a lot of people see the parallels, it's also a little bit based around The Wizard of Oz, because the four central characters in The Way kind of go through similar experiences to the four central characters in The Wizard of Oz, and they have similar characteristics. So, that's quite interesting. But as I said, I don't really want to do a movie review. I'd rather talk about that question of, but is the Camino really like that? Some people are surprised when I say yes. My first Camino was exactly like the movie, which I, in the more sort of snobby pilgrim circles, I kind of go, it's just a movie and the Camino's not really like that. My first Camino was very like the movie, I have to say. I didn't expect it to be. I didn't sort of turn up in southern France thinking it was going to be like the movie, but I opened myself up to whatever was going to happen. Lots of amazing things happened. And in general terms, my experience was very like that of the character of Tom Avery in the movie. No, I didn't get locked up by the police. No, I didn't have my bag stolen. No, I didn't meet I was going to say crazy, but a delightful dope-smoking Dutchman. He's one of my favourite characters, I think, Joust in that movie. But yeah, I mean, my first Camino was very, very like the experience that Tom Avery had in the character Tom Avery in the movie. So if you look at it on the surface, there's a danger that you kind of say, oh look, it's just a Hollywood movie and it's set on the Camino, and there the parallels end. But if you dig beneath some of those, not superficial, that's not the right term, but some of those little instances that happen along the way, if you kind of dig a little bit deeper about what actually happens to the characters during the movie, that, I reckon, is very like the Camino and what happens on the Camino. I should just point out, a lot of people say, oh, it's a Hollywood version of the Camino. It's not a Hollywood movie. It was a totally independent movie. They funded it themselves. They got some backers. So that's probably the reason it was never a huge box office hit. I don't know why. I mean, even if you're not into the Camino, I think it's a great movie. I think it's a wonderful story. Lots of people say it's great. There's no violence and sex and all the rest of it. It's just a good story. I would watch it just for that. Okay, so what are some of the things that I think it really nails? So if you're going to watch the movie and go and walk on the Camino, it's not exactly how it's going to be. But here are some of the things that will be, like you see in the movie. Number one, I think the transformational nature of the journey. So the character Tom Avery, he's just lost his son. He's a little bit lost. He's angry at his son for the way he's sort of thrown his life away and all these things. You begin to see that character kind of softens during the journey. He's interacting with people. He's opening up. And I won't do a spoiler at the end of the movie. There's a nice sort of closing scene at the end. But that absolutely is what happens on the Camino. If you allow yourself to, if you open up, if you're accepting of what's going on around you. And that has happened on all of my Caminos. That's why I love it so much. I basically turn up with no expectation, unplug from the world, start walking and see what happens. And that kind of personal transformation takes place if you're open to it. On my very first Camino, I have to say, when I returned from it, my wife said, "You've changed. You've come back a bit like a monk." And some of the transformation for me was that I was a lot less materialistic. I was way more interested in other people. I probably had a very superficial interaction with people. Now I'm genuinely interested in other people and what they're doing and getting to know them. That happens on the Camino because you're part of this, particularly on the Camino Francis, which can be quite busy. You're part of this group of people all heading down the exact same path to the same place. And it's a really wonderful experience. So that brings me on to the second point, which I think the movie gets really right. And that is the people that you meet along the way. You meet people that you would normally not interact with at all. If I look back on that first Camino particularly, I just met the most amazing people of all ages and backgrounds and from different countries. And yeah, I'll confess they maybe are not people that I would normally have interacted with, but because you're all on this common purpose, and heading down the same path, a lot of people say it's a little bit like speed dating on steroids, and it is. You very often find within minutes of meeting someone, you're sharing, some tragedy perhaps that led to you walking the Camino, or they are, and people are just really open and sharing, and it's a fantastic experience. So, meeting such a cross-section of people is an amazing part of walking the Camino. And that's why I say the movie is very like that, because, okay, he meets three other sort of larger-than-life characters, but, gee, I met amazing people that I bonded with and walked with for days and days, and, that element was very like that. So the transformative nature, the meeting of other people and bonding with, people of all different backgrounds that you wouldn't normally hang out with, but because all of the superficiality is stripped away and you're just two people walking down a track, you kind of connect a lot better. I don't know why. The third bit that I would mention is, which I think is really like the movie, is the way that you can disconnect from the modern world. And life just becomes simple. And we see that again with the character of Tom Avery. I think, after a few days, he's ringing his secretary, who is actually his daughter. His secretary in the movie is played by his daughter. And he's sort of saying, cancel all my meetings for the next month. That was kind of like me on my first Camino, except that I did it before I went. I basically said, look, I'm out of contact for 6 weeks. That's it. And so I was able to just totally disconnect and start to lead a very simple life. This takes a few days to get into it, and that's why often when I'm talking to people, or I may have mentioned it in a couple of videos on this channel, that if you're going to walk a Camino, I would try to walk for more than a week. The vast majority of people walk 100 kilometres. The reason for that is that you have to walk at least 100 kilometres to get your certificate from the Pilgrim's office in Santiago. You have to ride a horse or cycle for 200 kilometres. You have to walk for 100 kilometres. And because people can't get a lot of time off, so the majority just walk that short distance. So, it's probably a week or less. I find when you're walking more than a week, and particularly as you're sort of starting to hit 2 weeks, that disconnected sort of state and that change to a much more simple life where all you're thinking about each day is where shall I walk to, where shall I eat, where will I sleep, and enjoying the people that you meet around you, enjoying nature. I find you get a fantastic connection to nature after a couple of weeks. You really, I don't know, it's the term grounded. Yeah, you just kind of become part of nature somehow, much more aware of the plants and animals around you, and you just kind of stay connected. So to the extent sometimes that when you come into a large town, and on the Camino Frances as an example, which is in the movie, you do come to some large towns, you'll hit Burgos, Leon, places like that. I kind of didn't want to stay there. I just wanted to move on through. I wanted to be out in that open landscape and connected to nature again. So that third element of sort of being disconnected, I think that comes through pretty well in the movie. And then, the fourth one I was going to mention was that sense of connectedness to your surroundings, to people, and depending whether you're a religious person or spiritual or whatever, I think regardless, you get a much heightened sense of depth of spirituality, whatever that means to you. And I think it's partly because you're walking maybe on your own a lot of the time. You're walking along a 1,000-year-old pilgrimage route. You're meeting other people who are on a similar journey. And it's kind of the catalyst for you to think more about, your purpose and priorities, but also to think about things, beyond. I won't go any more than that. But I had some amazing spiritual encounters whilst I was walking in Camino. And I mentioned one of these on one of the videos. It might be the one called Crying on Camino or something like that. I'm not a religious person. I'm kind of spiritual. I love being in ancient churches and temples and things like that. But, some very spiritual stuff happened to me, particularly on my first Camino. So there's four things, I think, where if you kind of look beneath the surface of the day-to-day things that the characters are going through in the movie, at the sort of underlying elements like, the transformative nature of it and, addressing the priorities in their lives and things like that, how they're opening up to people, all of that, is very, very like walking a Camino, particularly the Camino Frances, which has a lot of people on it. So back to the question, is the Camino like the movie? I would have to say yes. Now, people are probably going to comment below and say, of course it's not, because they're sleeping, in the cloisters of an albergue, and that's not an albergue, it's a church. Yes, some of it was filmed off Camino. It's a movie. You had to get the right sets and things like that. But it's not right, because just past El Burgo Romero, they're walking in the wrong direction. Yeah, but it makes the scene look better, because otherwise you're looking at the street. They're walking in jeans, no one walks in jeans. Well, get over it. It's a story. But the underlying sense of what it's like to be on a Camino and what you might feel walking a Camino, absolutely. I reckon they nail it. Treat it as a movie, not a documentary. I have to say, why do I keep watching it? I just love it. I mean, there's a couple of scenes in it which I'm over. And I skip through those, but I love the scenery and it kind of takes me back there a bit, and I love recognizing the places. And we've visited a lot of the locations where the movie was shot. There was there's a wonderful scene. This is not a spoiler. There's a scene where they're invited to I'll just call it a party with some gypsies when they're in Burgos. We actually found where that was filmed in Burgos, and it's opposite a fantastic restaurant where we had lunch. We were having lunch in the restaurant and came out, and I said to Pat, "That's where they filmed that gypsy party," and we walked across, and it was. It's fun watching the movie just to sort of spot the locations, but some of them are off the Camino, so you won't see them. So if you're planning to walk your first Camino, and you've seen the movie, or maybe you're planning to watch the movie, you're thinking, is it really like that? Well, are you going to get drunk and get locked up? And, it's a little bit larger than life. Some of the day-to-day things are a little bit larger than life. You have to make it interesting as a movie, but some of the underlying things that happen, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's like the Camino. My one tip on walking a Camino, if you have never walked a Camino, and I will say that there are many, many routes. There are dozens of Camino routes. The most popular one is the Camino Frances. That's the one that features in the movie. Prior to COVID, I'm shooting this in March 2021. Prior to COVID, about 300,000 people a year were walking that one. There are many other more remote routes, if that's your thing. But if you are thinking of walking a Camino, you'll find lots of videos and tips and things on this channel. But one that I would just like to highlight, kind of in the backdrop with this movie as a backdrop, if you're a particularly shy or introverted person, take a deep swallow, smile at the other pilgrims, say hi, invite conversation. Because one of the most amazing things in walking a Camino, particularly the Frances, because there's quite a few people walking it, is the interactions that you get with the other pilgrims. And if you kind of avoid everybody, you're going to miss out so much on that. So I'm not saying, go and hassle people, but kind of, be open to having a chat. Don't kind of have a surly face on all the time so people avoid you. And you will just find some amazing people to talk to and amazing stories. And, you'll probably end up thinking, wow, this person's so interesting, and you'll say, you want to walk together tomorrow? And that happens a lot. You just kind of bond with people and you end up walking with them for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days. Some people meet people and walk the whole Camino with them. I'm not sure that's great because you end up in a little bubble. But leave yourself open to chatting with other people. And again, on some of the videos on the channel, I talk about some of the amazing people I met. I mean, off the top of my head, Ramon. If you're watching this, Ramon, I met Ramon coming out of El Burgo Renero in 2015. Ramon is an Aussie who was actually born in Galicia, and Ramon and I just, we hit it off so well. We chatted for about 2 or 3 hours until I couldn't keep up with him anymore. He walked too fast for me. But, we just, couldn't stop talking. Amazing, connection. I've rabbited on. Hopefully I've answered that question. Is the Camino like the movie? Yes and no. If you look on the surface at the individual little things that happen on a day-to-day basis, some of those are a little bit over-dramatized. But under the surface, the underlying stories, the transformations, all the rest of it, yes, absolutely. That is what it is like walking the Camino. So thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, I don't normally do movie reviews. We talk about all kinds of Camino topics here. But if you enjoy the channel, please do hit subscribe, hit like, do comment down below. I'd love to get loads of comments, share the channel. We're almost up to 1,000 subscribers, which I know in YouTube terms is pretty mediocre. I actually have another business channel, which we've just hit 30,000 subscribers, but kind of this is my passion channel. We might have to celebrate hitting 1,000 subscribers in some way. So if you've got any ideas, comment down below. Just before we go, since I first shot this video about the movie The Way, I've read this. Let me just make sure the light's not reflecting on it. What is it? It's a book called Off the Road by Jack Hitt. And why did I read that? Because on the opening credits of the movie, Emilio Estevez wrote the movie, but he also says that there were selected stories taken from this book. So I thought, could be an interesting book. And it was. And there are quite a few stories straight out of the book. So if you love the movie, you might enjoy the book. Just mention it. If anybody knows when this was written, I would be very interested to know. I had a look at the, the normal copyright stuff at the front, and it was first copyrighted in 1994. So Jack obviously walked prior to that. But you do get the distinct impression that the Camino hadn't quite reached its current day sort of level of commercialisation while he's walking. You know, some wonderful stories in it. I won't spoil it. But I suspect he walked maybe about 1990, something like that. Maybe if you know, comment down below. So just wanted to throw that in, as well as a great movie. The book that some of the stories are taken from is also a great book. So thanks for watching and see you next week.